the Kepler Institute's xenobiology wing hummed with the sort of academic desperation that only comes from 4 centuries of productive failure. In Laboratory 7 Alpha, Doctor. Vexhai adjusted her compound eyes for the 10,000th time this year, peering through the containment field at what the galaxy's brightest minds had christened Subject X1127. Everyone else called it the eyeball monster, though never within earshot of the department heads. The thing floated there, perfectly spherical, roughly the size of a Terran grapefruit, its translucent surface revealing what appeared to be a massive central eye. Not eye-like, not reminiscent of an eye, an actual honest-to-entropy eye that stared back with the unblinking intensity of a cosmic judge weighing the worth of entire civilizations. Still giving you the creeps, Vex? Professor Quillen's voice rippled through the atmosphere processors as his gaseous form coalesced beside the observation station. It doesn't give me anything, Vexhai clicked, her mandibles betraying irritation. I'm a xenobiologist, not a superstitious flarg farmer. It's simply unusual. Unusual. Quillen's electromagnetic field pulsed with what passed for amusement among his species. 400 years of study, and you call it unusual. The Grental Confederacy fought a 3-decade war over whether it represented the birth of consciousness itself or proof that the universe was fundamentally malevolent. The entire Wisdom Council of Altair declared it a philosophical impossibility. But you call it unusual. Vexhai's antennae twitched. The Grental fight over everything. Remember when they declared war on the concept of the number 7? Fair point. They'd been through this routine before, these two, the galaxy's foremost experts on the inexplicable. Vexhai approached problems like a surgeon approaches tumors, methodically, precisely, with the absolute confidence that enough cutting would reveal the truth. Quillen preferred the philosopher's approach. Poke at something until it either made sense or drove you completely insane. Neither method had worked on Subject X1127. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. Run through the daily observation checklist, Vexhai muttered, pulling up her holographic notepad. Temperature? Precisely 293.15 Kelvin, as always. Electromagnetic signature? Background normal. No variation in 400 standard years. Cellular activity? Quillen's form brightened with exasperation. Vex, we've established it doesn't have cells, or tissues, or organs, or any identifiable biological structure beyond the apparent eye. Apparent eye, Vexhai repeated. Emphasis on apparent. We still don't know what it actually is. We know it's impossible. The thing about impossibilities in xenobiology was that they had a nasty habit of being true anyway. The specimen didn't conform to any known biological classification system. It required no nutrients, produced no waste, showed no signs of aging or decay. It didn't reproduce, didn't respond to stimuli, didn't do anything except exist and stare. The staring was the worst part. Professor Teek's latest paper suggests it might be a crystalline entity mimicking biological structures, Vexhai said, scrolling through her notes. Teek's an idiot. His last theory was that it was a juvenile star attempting to achieve consciousness. That was admittedly creative. That was academically suicidal. Vexhai had to admit Quillen had a point. The specimen had destroyed more academic careers than a poorly timed budget cut. Researchers spent decades developing elaborate theories about its nature, purpose, and origin, only to have their work demolished by the simple fact that nothing about Subject X1127 made sense. The discovery had been accidental, naturally. A deep space mining vessel had detected an anomalous energy signature in the void between. That cheerful designation for the empty space between galactic arms where nothing interesting was supposed to exist. The mining crew, expecting to find a stray asteroid, or perhaps some exotic matter, instead found something impossible floating in the darkness. Just floating. Waiting. Watching. The original survey team's report makes for interesting reading, Quillen mused, apparently following a similar train of thought. Captain Zorak wrote that his crew refused to bring it aboard initially, said it felt wrong somehow. Zorak was a cargo hauler, not a scientist. Zorak was a cargo hauler who'd seen more of the galaxy than either of us. When someone with that much experience says something feels wrong. You sound like you're developing mystical tendencies. I'm developing pattern recognition. 400 years of study, Vex. 847 published papers. 23 different classification systems, each one contradicting the last. We've scanned it with every instrument known to science, subjected it to every test imaginable, and consulted with experts from every major species in the galaxy. And we still have no idea what it is. Vexahai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The humans requested to join the research project. The humans. Quillen's electromagnetic field dimmed. Barely out of their own solar system, and they think they can solve what the galaxy's best minds have been puzzling over for centuries. Their application was surprisingly thorough. They've apparently developed some novel approaches to xenobiology. Novel approaches, Quillen repeated. They've been spacefaring for what, 50 years? We've been doing science since before their star formed. The laboratory's main entrance hissed open, interrupting their conversation. A figure in a standard-issue research suit wandered in, moving with the peculiar casual confidence that seemed to characterize humans. They were smaller than most galactic species, bipedal, with that unsettling habit of showing their teeth when they were pleased. Dr. Vexhai? Professor Quillen? The human's voice carried, that flat, matter-of-fact tone their species seemed to favor. I'm the exchange researcher from the Terran Science Consortium. You can call me Doc. Vexhai studied the newcomer with professional interest. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last few decades. Their scientific methodology was considered primitive by most standards, though a few researchers had noted some intriguingly unconventional approaches to problem-solving. Welcome to Laboratory 7 Alpha, Vexhai said formally. I trust you've reviewed the preliminary materials on Subject X-1127. Doc nodded, approaching the containment field with what could only be described as casual interest. Not the reverential awe that most first-time observers displayed, not the academic fascination that drove researchers to spend decades studying the specimen. Just interest. So this is the famous eyeball monster, Doc said, peering through the containment field. Huh? Quillen's form rippled with indignation. 4 centuries of intensive study, and your considered professional opinion is, huh? Doc shrugged, a gesture that looked distinctly alien when performed in a pressure suit. It's just not what I expected. What did you expect? Vexhai asked. Something more mysterious, I guess. The laboratory fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Quillen's electromagnetic signature flickered with what might have been suppressed fury, while Vexhai felt her antennae begin to twitch with the sort of irritation that preceded either breakthrough insights or complete mental breakdowns. Not mysterious, she repeated slowly. Oh, don't get me wrong, Doc said, still studying the specimen with that infuriatingly casual demeanor. It's definitely interesting. I'm just surprised nobody's figured out what it is yet. And with that single throwaway comment, Doc had managed to accomplish what 400 years of dedicated research had failed to do. Make Subject X-1127 seem less like an cosmic enigma and more like a particularly stubborn homework assignment. Vexhai's mandibles clicked ominously. This was either going to be the most productive collaboration in xenobiological history, or the shortest. She suspected it might be both. 3 days into the humans' residency, the xenobiology department had developed a collective twitch. Doc wandered through their carefully organized research protocols like a tourist browsing gift shops, poking at things, asking uncomfortable questions, and displaying a thoroughly inappropriate lack of reverence for established methodology. Your containment field is running at 17% above minimum safe parameters, Doc observed, tapping the control panel with one gloved finger. Any particular reason? Dr. Kethmore, the Altarian biochemist, looked up from his spectral analysis station with the expression of someone whose fundamental worldview was under assault. Safety protocols demand maximum containment for unknown xenobiological entities. Unknown, sure, but dangerous? We don't know what it's capable of. Right, but you've been studying it for 4 centuries without incident. At some point, wouldn't you downgrade the threat assessment? Kethmore's head tendrils writhed with indignation. The specimen's quiescent behavior doesn't indicate benevolence. It could be waiting, planning, observing us as we observe it. Doc nodded thoughtfully. So, your working theory is that it's playing the long game. 400 years of pretending to be harmless while secretly plotting galactic domination. Mock, if you want, human. The consciousness wars taught us to respect the unknown. The what wars? Vexhai glided over before Kethmore could launch into historical exposition. Ignore him. Kethmore sees malevolent intelligence in weather patterns. I do not. Last month you submitted a paper arguing that cosmic background radiation was attempting to communicate. Doc turned back to the containment field, studying the readouts with the sort of focused attention that made experienced researchers nervous. How many different theories have you guys generated about this thing? Officially? 237 distinct hypotheses across multiple disciplines, Professor Quillen materialized beside them. Unofficially, closer to 1,000 if you count the graduate student papers and the really creative interpretations. Creative interpretations? The Department of Theoretical Philosophy published a treatise suggesting it was the universe's attempt to understand itself through self-observation, Vexhai explained. The paper was 800 pages long and contained 17 different mathematical proofs that consciousness was geometrically impossible. Doc whistled, a sound that apparently translated across species as mild amazement. And none of these theories panned out? Define panned out, Quillen said. We've learned tremendous amounts about observational bias, the limits of scientific methodology, and the psychological effects of studying impossible phenomena. Just nothing about the actual specimen. But you kept studying it. What else would we do? Kethmore interjected. Abandon the greatest mystery in xenobiological history because it's difficult? Maybe step back and reconsider your basic assumptions. The laboratory's ambient noise seemed to diminish as every researcher in earshot turned towards the human. In 4 centuries of study, no one had suggested that their fundamental approach might be flawed. Our assumptions? Vexhai's mandibles clicked dangerously. We've approached this from every conceivable angle. Biological, mechanical, energy-based, quantum mechanical, interdimensional. But always assuming it's some kind of advanced or exotic phenomenon. It's floating in space without life support, doesn't age, doesn't eat, doesn't reproduce, and stares at everything with perfect awareness, Professor Quillen's electromagnetic field pulsed with controlled irritation. What exactly about that suggests simplicity? Doc shrugged again. That maddeningly casual gesture. Maybe it's not doing any of those things. We have 400 years of observational data proving otherwise. Data proving it appears to do those things. Kethmore's head tendrils writhed faster. Are you suggesting our instruments are faulty? Our methodology is flawed? That the collective genius of the galaxy's premier research institution has been systematically wrong for 4 centuries? I'm suggesting, Doc said, pulling up the specimen's discovery records on a nearby terminal, that maybe you've been asking the wrong questions. The original survey data scrolled past on the holographic display. Energy signatures, mass readings, initial observational reports. Doc studied them with the same casual attention they'd given everything else, occasionally muttering things like interesting and huh that made the assembled researchers increasingly uncomfortable. Captain Zorak's initial report mentions finding it drifting in a standard shipping trajectory, Doc noted. Deep space has currents, Vexahai said defensively. Gravitational influences, stellar winds, quantum fluctuations. Sure, but those are chaotic. This trajectory was geometric, almost like it was following a planned route. Or like it was intelligent and chose that path, Kethmore added. Or, Doc continued, scrolling through more data, like it fell out of something traveling that route. Professor Quillen's form brightened with what might have been amusement or apoplectic fury. Fell out of something? You're suggesting our cosmically significant specimen is space debris? I'm not suggesting anything yet, just reading the data without preconceptions. Without preconceptions, Vexahai repeated, her tone carrying the weight of 4 centuries of academic pride. Human, we are the galaxy's foremost experts on xenobiological phenomena. We don't work from preconceptions, we work from evidence. Right, but evidence filtered through the assumption that anything this unusual must be correspondingly significant. And what's wrong with that assumption? Doc looked up from the terminal, meeting Vexahai's compound gaze with disturbing directness. Sometimes the most unusual thing about something is that it's completely ordinary. The laboratory fell into the sort of silence usually reserved for moments of profound revelation or complete intellectual collapse. Researchers throughout the facility had stopped their work to listen to the human systematically dismantle centuries of careful scientific progress with casual observations and uncomfortable questions. Ordinary, Kethmore whispered, as if the word might summon demons. Could be, Doc said. Mind if I take a look at the original physical analysis reports? Not the theoretical interpretations, just the raw measurement data. Vexahai hesitated. The original analysis reports were considered foundational documents, sacred texts that had launched 1,000 research careers. Letting an outsider, especially a human barely out of their own solar system, examine them felt like academic heresy. But scientific curiosity won over institutional pride, as it had for 400 years. Professor Quillen, access the primary archive. Are you certain about this, Vex? Some of those reports contain conclusions that have shaped galactic understanding of consciousness, perception, and the nature of observation itself. I'm certain that we're missing something fundamental. The archived data materialized in the holographic display, detailed measurements, molecular scans, energy analyses, structural assessments. 4 centuries of accumulated scientific observation reduced to raw numbers and technical specifications. Doc studied the data with increasing interest, occasionally cross-referencing different measurements, comparing energy signatures to background readings, examining structural analyses from multiple angles. Fascinating, Doc murmured. What's fascinating? Vexahai demanded. I think I know what you're looking at. Every researcher in the laboratory turned toward the human, with expressions ranging from desperate hope to barely contained homicidal rage. After 400 years of mysteries, theories, and academic warfare, someone was claiming to have answers. But first, Doc continued, I need to see the complete discovery documentation. Everything. Survey logs, recovery procedures, transport records, initial containment protocols. That's restricted archive material, Kethmore protested. Classified at the highest departmental levels. Doc's grin was distinctly predatory. Trust me, you're going to want to declassify it. The restricted archives of Laboratory 7 Alpha contained materials that had sparked 3 academic wars, launched 17 separate research initiatives, and driven at least 1 prominent xenobiologist to voluntary exile in the Outer Rim. Doc scrolled through 4 centuries of carefully classified documentation with the enthusiasm of someone reading grocery lists. Then the human started laughing, not chuckling. Not the polite acknowledgement of mild amusement. Full-throated, doubled-over, tears streaming down the face laughter that echoed through the laboratory like a death knell for academic dignity. What? Vexhai demanded, her mandibles clicking with barely restrained violence. Is so amusing about our foundational research? Doc wiped their eyes, still chuckling. I'm sorry, it's just… Oh man, you guys are thorough. Really, impressively thorough. Thoroughness is the cornerstone of scientific inquiry, Professor Quillen intoned, his electromagnetic field flickering with wounded pride. Absolutely. It's just that you've been thoroughly studying the wrong thing. Dr. Kethmore's head tendrils writhed into defensive positions. Impossible. Every major research institution in the galaxy has verified our findings. The specimen exhibits properties that fundamentally challenge our understanding of biology, consciousness, and material science, Doc interrupted. You should have consulted material scientists. We consulted 17 material science specialists, Vexhai snapped. Professor Nextal from the Rigel Institute spent 3 years analyzing its structural composition. Dr. Wem published a definitive paper on its unique molecular arrangements. The entire crystalline studies department at… Did any of them consider manufacturing techniques? The question hung in the air like cosmic radiation. Invisible, persistent, and slowly poisoning everything around it. Vexhai felt her antennae beginning to twitch in the particular pattern that preceded either breakthrough insights or complete nervous breakdowns. Manufacturing, she repeated carefully. Yeah, like, how do you make something that looks like this? Doc gestured toward the specimen. What tools would you need? What materials? What production methods? It's a biological entity, Kethmore protested. Not manufactured. Evolved. Or created through some advanced xenobiological process we don't understand yet. Doc pulled up a technical schematic from the archives, a detailed cross-section showing the specimen's internal structure. See this lattice pattern in the core material? And these stress distribution markers along the surface? Fascinating structural adaptations, Professor Quillen agreed, possibly indicating evolutionary pressure toward maximum observational efficiency. Or quality control marks from an industrial fabrication process. The laboratory's life support systems seemed to hiccup as every researcher present processed this statement. 400 years of careful scientific observation, and a human was suggesting they'd been studying industrial waste. Quality control marks, Vexhai said slowly. Standard practice in precision manufacturing. You create test patterns that let you verify structural integrity without compromising the final product. Doc highlighted several features on the schematic. These microscopic variations you've cataloged as biological irregularities, they're tolerance markers, intentionally built-in imperfections that prove the manufacturing process is working correctly. Dr. Kethmore's head tendrils had gone completely rigid. You're suggesting that the greatest mystery in xenobiological history is… A product, yeah. What kind of product requires this level of precision manufacturing? Quillen demanded. What species possesses technology capable of creating such sophisticated optical instruments? Doc's grin returned, broader and more disturbing than before. You're asking the right questions now. Vexhai felt the familiar sensation of academic foundations shifting beneath her feet. The discovery location. That trajectory pattern you mentioned earlier. Exactly. Space isn't empty. There are shipping lanes, established routes between systems, regular traffic patterns. Your specimen was found along a route that connects Sol System to the Centauri trading posts. Sol System, Kithamore whispered. Human space. Human space circa 2387, to be precise. Right around the time we started regular cargo runs to Alpha Centauri. The implications hit the assembled researchers like a collapsing star. Professor Quillen's electromagnetic field dimmed to almost nothing. Dr. Kethamore's head tendrils drooped with existential defeat. Vexhai's compound eyes refocused and unfocused as her brain struggled to process the possibility that the galaxy's greatest scientific mystery might have a disappointingly mundane explanation. You're claiming, she said carefully, that subject X1127 is human in origin. I'm claiming it's consistent with human manufacturing techniques from about 400 years ago. But the complexity, the precision, the impossible biological properties. What biological properties? Doc challenged. It doesn't eat, doesn't reproduce, doesn't age, doesn't respond to stimuli. Those aren't biological properties. They're the absence of biological properties. It's inorganic. The eye looks like an eye. Big difference. Quillen's form rippled with desperate resistance. Our sensors detect organic compounds, carbon-based molecular structures, clear evidence of biological origin. Your sensors detect materials that could be organic, but carbon-based doesn't automatically mean biological. Lots of manufactured products use organic compounds, plastics, composites, synthetic materials. Doc pulled up another section of the archive, displaying spectrographic analyses from multiple research teams. Look at these molecular signatures. You've been interpreting them as exotic biological compounds, but they're actually consistent with high-grade synthetic polymers. Synthetic polymers, Vexhai repeated, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone watching their life's work crumble into cosmic dust. Really good ones, too. We developed some impressive materials technology in the late 24th century, just before we made contact with the galactic community. Kethamore rallied for one final defense of centuries of academic tradition. Even if, hypothetically, it's manufactured, that doesn't explain its perfect spherical shape, its optical properties, its apparent awareness. Actually, it does. Doc's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching sympathy. You've been working under the assumption that it's observing you. But what if you've got it backwards? Backwards? What if it's designed to be observed? The question reframed 4 centuries of research in a single sentence. Every paper, every theory, every academic war fought over the specimen's nature, all of it based on the assumption that they were studying something that possessed agency, intelligence, purpose. But if Doc was, right, they'd been studying something designed to be studied, a tool created specifically for observation, not by it, but of it. A prosthetic, Vexhai whispered, the terrible truth finally crystallizing in her mind. Doc nodded. Specifically an ocular prosthetic. High-end model, probably custom-made, designed to replace a lost eye with something functionally and cosmetically superior to the original. The laboratory fell silent except for the ambient hum of equipment that had spent 4 centuries analyzing a piece of medical hardware. Professor Quillen's electromagnetic field flickered with what might have been amusement or complete psychological breakdown. 400 years, he murmured. 847 research papers, 3 academic wars. The consciousness wars themselves were triggered by philosophical implications derived from this specimen. Yeah, Doc said gently. About that. Captain Miranda Vasquez, cargo freighter Northbound Express, Doc read from the historical records. Lost her left eye in a decompression accident while hauling rare earth metals from Luna to Proxima Station. Standard insurance covered a basic replacement, but she splurged on the Deluxe model. Synthetic cornea, autofocusing lens, enhanced light sensitivity. Cost her 6 months' salary. Vexhai listened with the expression of someone watching their universe reorganize itself around fundamentally different principles. How do you know this? Because humans keep records of everything. Medical procedures, insurance claims, shipping manifests. We're compulsive documentarians. Doc scrolled through archived files with practiced efficiency. The Northbound Express suffered catastrophic hull failure in the void between on March 15, 2387. Emergency evacuation, total loss of cargo and personal effects. Including one very expensive prosthetic eye, Professor Quillen observed, his electromagnetic field now pulsing with what was definitely amusement. Including one very expensive prosthetic eye that got sucked out during decompression and has been floating through space ever since. Dr. Kethamore's head tendrils twitched spasmodically. But the staring, the awareness, the sense of intelligence behind that gaze. Optical illusion, Doc explained. High-end prosthetics are designed to track movement and maintain eye contact. Even without neural input, the autofocusing mechanisms respond to light changes and nearby motion. It's literally designed to look like it's watching you. The temperature regulation? Built-in heating element to match body temperature, prevents fogging and maintains comfort. The perfect preservation over centuries? Military-grade synthetic materials designed to last decades inside a human body. In the vacuum of space, without biological degradation factors, it could last millennia. Each explanation landed like a hammer blow against the edifice of xenobiological theory that had dominated galactic science for 4 centuries. Vexhai felt her worldview collapsing one carefully constructed assumption at a time. The academic implications, she whispered, are actually pretty interesting, Doc admitted. You've basically conducted the most comprehensive study of observational bias in scientific history. Quillen's form brightened with reluctant curiosity. Observational bias? Think about it. You found something that looked like an eye, so you assumed it could see. You couldn't explain how it worked, so you assumed it was advanced. You couldn't categorize it, so you assumed it was alien. Every assumption led you further from the truth. Kethamore slumped against his workstation. We destroyed our objectivity through the act of observation. Worse than that, Doc continued cheerfully. You created a feedback loop. The more mysterious it seemed, the more prestigious studying it became. The more prestigious the research, the more invested everyone became in it being genuinely mysterious. Nobody wanted to be the scientist who solved the great puzzle with a mundane answer. The consciousness wars, Vexhai said quietly, started because the Altarian Philosophical Council declared that consciousness could only emerge from biological substrates, while the Synthetic Intelligence Alliance argued that any sufficiently complex system could achieve awareness. Doc nodded. 17 systems, 43 years of conflict, countless casualties, all because nobody wanted to admit they might be philosophizing about medical equipment. The laboratory's silence stretched beyond uncomfortable into genuinely existential. 400 years of careful science, academic careers built on studying the impossible, entire theoretical frameworks constructed around a single mysterious specimen, all of it reduced to a case study in how intelligent beings could systematically delude themselves But the discoveries, Quillen protested weakly. The advances in consciousness theory, the developments in observational methodology, the philosophical frameworks we developed to understand non-biological intelligence are all completely valid, Doc interrupted. Just because your starting premise was wrong doesn't invalidate everything you learned along the way. You've basically spent 4 centuries asking really good questions about the nature of perception, awareness, and scientific methodology. The fact that you were asking them about a piece of medical hardware doesn't make the questions less important. Vexhai considered this. We learned about ourselves by studying something that couldn't learn. Exactly. You used a mirror to study the act of seeing. An expensive mirror that cost Captain Vasquez 6 months' salary, Kethmore added morosely. The most productive research accident in galactic history, Doc agreed, though technically it was an insurance fraud accident that became a research accident. Insurance fraud? Doc's grin turned decidedly mischievous. Captain Vasquez filed a claim for total loss of personal medical device in line-of-duty accident. Got a full replacement and a disability pension. Never mentioned that her old prosthetic might still be floating around causing existential crises for alien scientists. So she knew? Vexhai demanded. Probably not. From her perspective, her fake eye got sucked into space and disappeared forever. She had no reason to think anyone would find it, let alone spend centuries studying it. Professor Quillen's electromagnetic field flickered with what might have been cosmic irony. The greatest mystery in xenobiological history, and the solution was basic human medical records. Sometimes the most profound mysteries have the simplest solutions, Doc observed. Though I have to admit, watching the galaxy's best scientists spend 4 centuries reverse engineering the philosophical implications of a glass eye has been educational. Glass eye, Kethmore repeated hollowly. Well, technically synthetic biocompatible polymer with integrated optical systems and thermal regulation. But glass eye is the traditional term. Vexhai looked at the specimen, at Captain Vasquez's prosthetic, with entirely different eyes. It hadn't changed. It still floated there, perfectly spherical, apparently watching everything with unblinking attention. But now she saw it for what it actually was. A triumph of human engineering, a solution to biological limitation, a piece of medical technology so well crafted that it had convinced the galaxy's most sophisticated minds that they were witnessing something impossible. It really is beautiful work, she admitted. Late 24th century human medical technology was pretty impressive, Doc agreed. We put a lot of effort into making replacement parts that were better than the originals. Better than evolution? Evolution is a hack job. Jury-rigged solutions that work just well enough to pass genetic material to the next generation. Engineering is intentional design toward specific performance goals. Quillen's form pulsed thoughtfully. So in studying this specimen, we were actually observing the intersection between evolved intelligence and designed enhancement. See? Still asking good questions. The irony was inescapable. In their desperate attempt to understand something beyond their experience, the galaxy's greatest scientific minds had actually discovered something profound about the nature of observation, consciousness, and the dangerous seductiveness of mystery. They'd spent 4 centuries learning to see clearly by staring at something designed to be seen. What happens now? Vexhai asked. Doc shrugged. That's up to you. You could publish the truth and watch 400 years of xenobiological theory collapse overnight. Or you could keep asking those good questions about consciousness and observation, just with better context about what you're actually studying. Academic suicide versus intellectual honesty, Kethmore observed. Welcome to science, Doc said cheerfully, where the most important discoveries are usually the ones that make you feel stupid for not seeing them sooner. Vexhai looked once more at the specimen that had defined her career, shaped her understanding of the universe and taught her more about the act of scientific observation than any textbook ever written. Captain Miranda Vasquez's prosthetic eye stared back with perfect, engineered attention. Still beautiful, still mysterious in its own way, still capable of inspiring wonder. Just not the kind of wonder they'd thought. Sometimes the most extraordinary thing about the ordinary was how long it could hide in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right perspective to finally see what had always been there. The eye had been watching them, after all. They'd just misunderstood what kind of watching it was designed to do.